Good morning. Thanks for making the trip here to beautiful OIT campus in Wilsonville. Wonderful to have you all in person for this first in-person meeting of 2025. I know we had a smooth Q1 meeting, but it really does make a difference, I think, to be in space, in community with each other. And I'm really looking forward to the today's agenda, which we'll talk through that agenda a little bit. I'll give you a sense of where we're headed today. So we've got the standard business here. We have a few new membership updates. We have some new ELT members, which I'm really excited to introduce you all to. I mean, you know who they are, but introducing them as ELT members is exciting. And then we'll get into the agenda. Our big action item today is approving the occupation and wage profiles. We started that conversation in Q1. Hopefully that's somewhat fresh in y'all's memory. But in your packets, you'll find occupation and wage profiles for the top, I think it's about 15 high-skilled professions in the manufacturing sector. And so we're hoping today we leave this meeting having approved that initial set of occupational profiles, and we'll have a good discussion about that. And we'll be using the consensus-based decision-making approach. So if you were here in March of 2024, but I understand that you have some familiarity. Hopefully, if you're a new member, we'll go through this. We'll review what these cards mean. But we're going to use that approach today for our action items. Then we've got an update about our working groups, and we'll take a break after that. We'll have lunch, and during lunch we have a really exciting panel. The Hillsborough Youth Apprenticeship folks that were involved in the development, the implementation, and the sustaining of that program are here to talk about that. And I think that is something that we want to continue to do in these consortium meetings, is kind of lead with learning and share models that are really working to advance a more accessible and equitable workforce system. And so my hope also is that you walk away from the meeting today thinking about things that you might want to share at subsequent meetings. If you want to be part of a panel or something like that, let's talk after the meeting. But we'll go to that when we talk a little bit about next steps at the end of the meeting as well. So with that in mind, we can go ahead to the next. Couple of objectives, like I said, introduce the new executive leadership team. I guess I've kind of gone through the meeting objectives, so we can go through the next. Actually, here's a really fun thing. I would like to introduce our executive leadership team. Right now, neither of them are here. So, in absentia, I would ask Jonathan and Mariah to say a few words. And I think Jonathan is coming. Unfortunately, Mariah will not be here today. She did let me know ahead of the meeting. But I would so like to introduce our new ELT member. So if you'll go to the next slide. Craig Campbell and Carly Petrovic have agreed to join the ELT. Carly's going to be representing sort of the employer representation. Craig is our industry association representative. And so Carly and Craig, would you like to just say a couple words and introduce yourself? Maybe talk about why you decided to join the leadership team?
Sure. So, I mean, I know most of you already. I have found such value from this consortium and the work that this team does. I've learned so much from all of you and have just really enjoyed it and gotten so much value from this group. And so when the opportunity to be part of the executive leadership team came up, I was so honored and really just jumped at the chance. And so really looking forward to working with all of you a little bit more closely and learning a bit more about manufacturing outside of what was certainly just in my world, in the semiconductor world. And just looking forward to continuing the work. Nick has just proven to be an amazing strategist as well. And so I think we have a great committee moving forward. So thank you.
I didn't pay her to say that.
And I was likewise very pleased to be asked. I'm looking forward to the work ahead, but when you have a group of people that have this much talent and networking connection with the state of Oregon, working towards what we already know to be the goals of the consortium, but also what we're going to be able to do in the future and how that's going to look. I'm really excited to be a part of that discussion with all of you, but I know know it's going to be extra work, but I'm looking forward to of the ELT as well. So I know most of you know me, and I know almost all of you. So nothing new there, but looking forward to continuing to get to work with you.
Thank you, Craig and Carly, and I really am grateful to you both. It is an additional commitment to be on the leadership team in terms of time and energy and focus, and so it means a lot that y'all were both willing to do that. So I think that's all to say that I think we're in good hands as a consortium in terms of our leadership team. So thank you. And I also want to introduce we have some membership updates as well. So if you'll slide for me. Tina Goldberg from the University of Oregon. She's been an alternate, and you've attended most of the meetings, I would say, at this point too. So we just went ahead and made it for her. So Tina will be a full member on the consortium going forward, and we're happy to have you here. Do you want to introduce yourself at all, or?
Sure. I think I've met most of you before, but I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Economic Development and Strategic Relations at the University of Oregon. The bulk of my work is focused on building partnerships with the private and public sectors for economic growth. And the work of this consortium is very important. That work and building partnerships with everyone is also important for that work. And so thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I also wanted to, we introduced one of our newer members, Justin Thibodeau, at last meeting. He was unable to make it to that last meeting, but Justin from Connected Lane County, I wanted to give you a chance to just introduce yourself as well as one of our new members.
Sure. Everybody, sorry, I could not make the virtual, but the in-person I'm here, so take that what you will. But it was a smooth drive. I work down in Lane County, largely the Springfield area, but Connected Lane County is a 501c3 nonprofit working to serve youth, largely ages 14 to 24, getting them into the workforce. Basically, anything that can get them thinking future-oriented about next steps. We try and keep them local in our economy, but certainly in our Oregon economy. And so they don't need to leave our state to find work, and getting them exposed to any and all opportunities. We also have accelerator programs in the tech field, manufacturing, health, and culinary hospitality. Obviously, the manufacturing one is why I'm here today. But we really have a lot of experience with boots on the ground, working with young people and getting them kind of exposed to what the workforce is expecting of them, but also the flip side of what the youth are looking for from the workforce. And so I think there's a good dialogue to be had both ways there. And so hopefully that can add some input there. So thanks for having me.
Happy. Great. So now we're all friends. And we can move on to our next agenda item, which is our consent agenda. Before we get into the consent agenda. Okay, thank you. So in your packet, you'll find that you have meeting minutes from February 12th. I want to, before we, I think oftentimes approving the meeting minutes is a very pro forma up or down exercise, but because we're going to be using this consensus-based approach for the, I think, more substantive action item today, I kind of wanted to review this while we have a little bit of time of how this works, this consensus-based decision-making. And so I pulled the slides from when Turner from Oregon Consensus made this presentation in March of 2024. And so just to review, if you go to the next slide for me, the consensus-based decision-making is baked into the consortium's charter. And the idea here is rather than just by advancing decisions by majority, so there's a caveat there, we really do try to advance decisions by consensus. And to kind of make that an easier process, we'll use these cards, and I'll get to the cards in a second, to indicate where you're at with a particular action item. So the caveat there being, if we can't reach consensus with this approach, then the ELT can call for an up or down, sort of majority if we need to advance an item, majority vote. So, but we will do our best to work through and discuss whatever the item is, whatever the issues are. And I think the idea here is it allows us to have a little bit of a nuanced conversation. I mean, often feeling just stuck between yes or no can feel a little bit reductive, right? So having the yellow of like, I think I'm leaning, I could be pushed one way or the other, but let's have a conversation about it. I think that really meets the spirit of what the consortium was designed to do. So just as a reminder, if you'll advance to the next slide for me, Ronan. Basically, you know, this is pretty intuitive, I think, right? Where if we ask you for an action item, you know, you put your green card or you hold your green card up, and you're just saying, I agree with the motion or the item as stated. Yellow is, I think I can agree, but I have some questions or some concerns. I'd like something clarified, and then we'll stop and we'll clarify or answer whatever questions or have whatever discussion. And then red is, well, I got an issue with this. And the idea though with holding up the yellow or red cards, there's responsibility there. You have to have something constructive, right, to add to the conversation. It's okay, I think, to have an issue with a particular agenda item, but in the idea here that we are working towards solutions, let's hear what potential solutions or actions we could take to address whatever the concerns are that have you at yellow or red. Any questions, reminders, any further explanation needed on this approach? Pretty intuitive, like I said. So why don't why don't you, if you haven't already, take a couple minutes to look at the meeting minutes, just look them over, and then when you feel like you're ready, hold up whichever card is to your heart's content.
We taking a vote on these or?
Yes. This is an item that we need the consortium to vote to. The action item is to approve the meeting minutes from February 12th. So if you agree with approving those, green card. If you have questions, yellow card. If you can't bring yourself to approve these meeting minutes, red card. And then let's talk about it. Yeah, maybe next time we'll get little holders for these. You can just that's a good idea. That's an arts and crafts project right there. I'm keeping track as y'all are holding up your green card, so I appreciate it. And I think there's just a few people reviewing the minutes, which is great. We've got time for that. I think I've seen everyone's consensus. Great. Did I miss anyone? Did anyone hold up a yellow or red card? I don't think so. Okay. I did forget to mention there is the sort of the abstain option too. So you know, I think depending on how you feel about the next item on our agenda, where we will be using this for something again a little bit more substantive, keep in mind that you can abstain from the vote as well, or the consensus approach. But what I saw was 100% green card. So I think that means we are good to move on. The minutes are approved, and we're good to move on to the next agenda item. Great. So no public comment, and that means we can talk about these occupation and wage profiles. We started this conversation in Q1. In fact, I think we actually started it even before Q1, right? We told you we would come to this meeting with some fully formatted occupation and wage profiles. We'll talk a little bit about what we have in terms of changes from the last time you've seen these based on the feedback that you all got, but I just kind of want to orient you all to what the ask is going to be today. And so if you'll advance the slide for me. There is an action item with this. So for the profiles, and we'll spend some time looking at these as well, and I'll walk you through one of them so you can see all the elements. We are going to be asking you to approve the packet in your folder of this initial set. So we will do these occupation wage profiles for all the high skill occupations in the manufacturing sector, and we'll bring that back to you for the Q3 meeting. But this initial set, we want to have something that we can potentially publish, start to socialize, and share with folks. And per the legislation, HB 3306, what that legislation says is that the industry consortia will approve this occupation and wage data, which sets wage rate standards by locality for the skilled occupations. And the idea there is really to improve transparency, particularly for those that are involved in earn and learn and paid training opportunities. So again, that's the language from the legislation. That isn't, heck rulemaking or anything like that, but that's the minimum requirement that we've been asked to do as industry consortia. Before we get into this a little bit more, we're going to kind of review the work so far, go through the timeline. Any questions, concerns about what we're getting into with this agenda item? Great. Then if you want to move on to the next slide.
All right. So hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Simonsbray. I'm the administrative specialist on the Future Ready team. And I've been doing some of the work behind the scenes, just preparing this set of profiles for you all today. I thought it might be helpful to just quickly review the statute so we're aware of what it is that we're actually being asked to do. So in 2023, the Oregon legislature passed House Bill 3306. This created a number of things. One of the only addition it made to the statutory requirements of the consortia was that each consortia will now have to establish wage rate standards by locality, your skilled occupation within each of the sectors, and once every 2 years, each consortia shall recalculate those standards using relevant data from the employment department specifically, and submit a statement to the commission summarizing the methodology that was used to produce those wage rate standards. So we have taken into consideration your feedback from the last meeting and are recommending that we move to approve this initial set of profiles in response to meeting what we see as the minimum statutory requirements of this bill. So with that in mind, we thought it might be helpful to sort of refresh on like where we've come with this work and where we're at and where we're hoping to go. So I put a little timeline on here. Again, that passed in February of 2023. The vast majority of our work on this project up to this point has really been in understanding what does it mean for this consortia to set wage rate standards varied by locality for each skilled occupation within each of the specified industry sectors. If you'll recall from our presentation that Q4 of last year, some of that work we did was really consulting with OED to sort of align our understanding of the legislations with their available data. That included some work we did around the methodology used by our partners in the employment department, how they collect that data, the sources for understanding what an industry sector is. We also covered some of those definitional decisions around skilled occupation and locality. And so just a reminder, when we say locality, we're meaning Workforce Development Board regions. When we say skilled occupation, we mean the Employment Department's definition of a high skilled occupation. Where we're at right now is really just getting into the first phase, or the first part of phase 2, which is meeting the minimum statutory requirements. That is like where we are just getting to today. That will include publishing wage sector information for all high skill occupations in each sector, publishing profiles for high skill occupations in each sector, and publishing some sort of summary methodology statement. Today, all we're asking you is approval of this first set of occupation profiles. So there's more coming, really, in terms of just meeting the statutory requirements. And then there's a third phase that, based on your feedback, we're recommending for this project, which includes career pathway credentialing and opportunity mapping. And then, I'm sure as Nick's going to mention later, there's going to be opportunity to further utilize this body of work in your working groups. Next slide. So quick refresh of OED methodology. Keep in mind when you're looking at this data, where it's coming from, how it's getting put together. I'm going to look at Gail to keep me honest here. And most of this, again, I'm not an expert in wage statistics or analysis, but most of this I've pulled from conversations and meetings we've had with our employment department partners. All of the wage data that you are seeing before you is derived from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics Occupational Employment and Wage Statistics Program that the employment department administers here in Oregon. These wage estimates do not necessarily reflect experience level or education level. The wage survey defines employment as workers covered by unemployment insurance. This may exclude the self-employed, owners or partners of unincorporated firms, unpaid family workers, and some commission-based sales agents. As to what an occupation is itself, again, these are groupings of similar jobs based on work performed and production processes. So what you're seeing in front of you is when you see electrician, although I guess that's a bad example, but like these don't necessarily correspond to job titles. So just keeping that in mind.
You'll recall at Q1, we presented a version of these profiles, and we had small group conversations about it. We did this also in the Technology Consortium as well. One of the things I kind of want to make clear is that this is a body of work that is being expected of all three consortia: healthcare, technology, and manufacturing. And so one of the trickier, I think, paths we're going to have to take here is that really for these to be broadly useful for workforce development across all three sectors, they have to be standardized across the consortia as well. So we're going to have to not only come to consensus here within this consortia, we're going to also need to sort of find consensus across the three consortia, which is really a task for our Q3 meeting. I think we are in a nice position because we're the first ones approving any of these. And so, frankly, it's our world and the rest of them can just play in it. But really, I do want to just address some of the feedback that we got at Q1, both from the manufacturing and the technology consortium, and how that it found its way into these updated profiles. A lot of the conversation, and I was really excited to see this, a lot of the conversation focused on how we might use these profiles, right? Like what are the next steps? So not so much concerns about what's being presented, how it's being collated, though there were some comments about that, but more about like, what are we going to do with this? And I think those are good conversations that I'm excited to have with you all. That being said, it's also somewhat outside of the scope right now of what we're asking for today in this initial approval. And I think the most specific, and I'll walk you through one of these here in a second. We messed around a little bit with the graphics, trying to make it more accessible. So like, I think that's one thing to think about if you're reviewing these profiles. Does this feel accessible to a general audience, right? Does this feel like something a guidance counselor, for example, at a high school could pull out and give to a student? That's kind of one of the ways in which we're envisioning this happening. Like, I'm interested in these occupations. we can print this off as a one pager, hand it to a student, or somebody in career services at PCC, or any of our education and training providers. It's a generalized audience that we're shooting for here with these. And there was some requests for some more regional focus, both in terms of wage differentiation and where there's growth or total annual openings. That being said, this is all data that we have repackaged from the employment department, right? So we are limited in terms of what data, and the legislation is very clear that we need to use employment department data. So we're somewhat limited in terms of what we can include here. So there may be things, I think, as you look through these, if you're like, why don't they have X, Y, or Z? There's a good chance we don't have it there because it's not a data metric that's being collected by OED. Maybe not. I mean, and we do have Gail here to say whether that's a fair assumption on our part or not. But I think what would be helpful right now. So if you haven't already, I would invite you to just pull the packet out. It looks like this table of contents. The packet includes the initial set of 15 professions, and my recollection, Ronan, is that we sort of selected these first 15 based on what was considered high skill, in demand, and high wage. Now we are going to be doing occupational profiles for all skilled occupations in the sector, regardless of whether they're in demand or what the wage is. That's what the legislation stipulates. But we wanted to start with sort of what feel like the most in demand, meeting all of the, let's say, exciting metrics for workforce development. So there are 15 of these profiles, and the way they're written, I hope this isn't too confusing, but we want this to be printed off as a one pager, really. So front page, back page for each of these. So if you're looking at them with the packet open, you're getting the totality of each occupational profile, and I think it's really important to keep it to one page, even if we're not printing them on with a legibility web page approach. Having it it's contained as possible is really important. So then just looking at the first one for CNC operators, for example, every one of these will have this basic template: an occupation description, the education requirements, including minimum and competitive education, what licenses and certifications are required for this profession. Most of these don't require licenses or certifications, but certain ones do. Electrician is a good example of one that would. We want folks to know that. And then we've got an estimate for entry-level hourly wage, total number of employed folks as of 2023, and then the projected job openings per year. We also have bar graphs breaking down where the employment is in terms of sector, and that's was using NAICS codes. Is that right? Yeah. NAICS codes. And then the other bar graph here, and this is one of the things I think we did change between Q1 and Q2, is a regional breakdown of the total annual openings, but also the growth openings. So you can get a sense of where there is growth for this occupation. The total annual openings are the sum of the growth openings and replacement openings. Is that fair? Yep, cool. And then if you flip over to the back, we have this map. We use our local workforce board regions to break out employment numbers for those regions for this occupation, and then wage data as well for the region. The other thing we added that we think is important are some of the knowledge and key skills. Again, thinking about that general audience, somebody, a student or a family who is potentially interested but doesn't necessarily know maybe what classes or electives to take, or maybe they're like, I know I have these aptitudes. I think our idea would even be to have tags with these profiles so that if somebody's sitting, that these become searchable by particular skills as well, and knowledge. And that information is from ONET, not which OED republishes on their profiles, but it does come from it doesn't directly come from OED, the ONET skills and knowledge. that's what each of these profiles is. And so what I would invite you to do, and we definitely have some time for this. So I would invite you to take 5 minutes to just look through the packet yourself. And then let's start the consensus process. If you would move to the we can have some discussion, but I just want to get an early sense of where folks are. But what we're going to be doing is, again, approving this initial set, so just for these 15 of wage profiles, so that we can start publishing these and just these on the website, socializing them as is appropriate, as we think about how to get this information out to the right audiences. That's the approval that we're going to be asking for. But go ahead and flip through this a little bit, think about this, and then let's have some discussion. And I think if you give me an initial green, yellow, red, that'll give us a sense of where we're at in terms of needing discussion on this item. And yeah, maybe that is the best way. If you want to lay your card flat in front of your name tag, or, I don't know if that will give me a sense of where folks are, and I can just call on you to share what you're going to be thinking.
So green is approving as is.
As is. Yeah. So, if you would like to see amendments potentially, or you have questions, then I think yellow would be the correct card to put up.
I have a question. Or,
I'm gonna
okay,
just so that people can hear.
I can talk loud for this. So my question is, we are basically approving or having conversation about the format, because the data is the data is the data, right? ID. So you're asking about the content and the layout and the flow and whether or not this is how we'd like it to be presented.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I think if there are specific metrics or data that you would like to see in these profiles, let's hear what those are, with the knowledge that may not be within the scope of what it is. But I think it's helpful for us to hear from you all. Man, it would be nice if it could include X, Y, and Z. There's every chance that we don't have access to that information, but there may be a chance that we do. Did you have your hand? No.
But I love the format, and the only thing I've thought of so far that I'd love to add is maybe example employers, if that's possible.
Okay.
So I do have questions about the data, though. Maybe these are Gail questions. I guess I want to understand the limitations of the data or what's not covered. Some of them seem. I don't have any other data, but some of them seem surprising. Some of the numbers are surprising, like CNC operator, 48 in the Mid-Valley, or CNC, I guess a CNC programmer, but I might be able to name 48 in the Mid-Valley, right? And
Second.
yeah, that's the
Give me
first
on which
one.
page.
Page 3, yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering are there other occupations related to CNC programming that some of those operators or programmers fit into? Yeah, talk to me about that.
Yes. So without a manual right in hand, I'm going to be a little bit on the fly. But what I was just saying over here as well is that so what the employment department does, just so that everybody knows how you get the numbers that are in here, is we send out surveys to employers every 6 months. There's a panel. And Oregon's one of the few states where it's mandatory that the employer responds to this. A lot of states really struggle getting as much response as they need to be able to publish stuff. But so we send a survey out to an employer, a private employer, and say, more or less, who works for you? And they write freehand, whatever they say. Okay, you know, I've got 5 people who who are machine operators. I've got 2 machine setters. I have 1 lead supervisor for the floor. I've got 2 people who do janitorial work, and I've got 5 sales staff and an executive assistant. So they just write whatever they want there, and then they say, this is how much we pay them per hour.
Okay.
And we get that information back from them. And then there's millions of job titles, right? Millions of them.
Yep.
There are 800 standard occupational classifications. So depending upon what the employer writes down, then we have a team that is dedicated to coding those into the proper occupations. So that's how it gets collected. There's also differences in where something might show up. This is filtered specifically in manufacturing. Okay. So one of the other things that happens in manufacturing, in other places too, but in manufacturing as well, is that I might be, I don't know, a wood products company, let's say. And usually we break them out pretty well, but some companies don't like to do multiple reports. They want to just get it done in one, right? That makes sense. And if they're a corporately headquartered company, they might get coded as management of companies as a corporate headquarters, all of their employment, or vice versa. It also happens where in some cases in the Portland area, I'm thinking of a couple of examples where all the corporate employment gets coded into manufacturing. So it's not super duper clean when you break it out like this. If you just take the whole occupation, like production workers, period, you'll get something different probably than, and like, what if you hire them or bring them on to a temp agency or something like that? That's not showing up on your payroll either.
Yeah.
So it's whoever's on your payroll. So it's not super clean, especially when you cut by sector, as opposed to just taking an occupation as a whole. And some of that might be at play in some of these. I'm looking at these for the first time myself as well. So I can't explicitly point to the Mid-Valley and say, I know why that's 48 instead of 148, but those are some of the types of things that can happen.
That's helpful context and explains on page 28. The semiconductor one was another one that surprised me. When I read the 28, yeah, when I read the occupation description there, the only companies I can think of that are sawing formed ingots, for example, or loading them into growing chambers, a lot of them are in that Lane County region, which shows NA, and surprised me a little bit. And maybe it's just that the people filling out the survey are coding them differently. They're not coding them as one of those 800 SOCs.
Yes, it could be getting processed as something else. And also, even though we're doing that panel every 6 months, in a whole year, we're only covering 1/3 of all the employers in the state.
Interesting.
Yeah. But it should, we compile it over time, so it should show up. But if something like came online in the last year, but we surveyed that company like 2 years ago, it might not. It might take a little time to fully catch up in there. Yeah.
And then last question for you, Gail. I'm sorry to.
I should have invited Jason to come on. So this is the person who like helps provide all the data and knows literally every detail of it, but I'll do my best.
There's a few of them. I'll point to page 7, Lane County, for an example, where we've got a wage listed, but employment is NA on Lane County, page 7. There's a handful of those in the packet, and I'm curious about that.
So as I mentioned, we're not surveying everybody every time, all the time, right? And so one of the things is, even though it is mandatory to respond, not everybody does it. And it's not like I get to go out there with a little ticket to find somebody for that. There's not really full teeth behind, like, you need to do that. And so if we either get too few responses for any given area, it's, again, breaking it out at this level of geographic detail is actually exceedingly more than any other state does. So there's not always enough of a sample or enough of a survey response, or if the error range is too high in the estimates, like if what gets reported is bad data and it doesn't, and they don't correct it, then it doesn't meet publication standards either because there's insufficient information that's provided to say that it's actually representative of what's going on there. Or we got data and the error range around employment was like plus or minus 30%. If it's beyond that, then we're like, we don't really feel good about standing behind that. So it doesn't get published. So it's either insufficient
helpful.
or a lack of quality data.
That's helpful. I think maybe we should call that out because if I'm an employer maybe and I see NA and I know I've got people in that county doing that work, I don't know, maybe we could just say what an NA is. That's a great answer you just gave.
Thanks.
Yeah, I really like the format and I really like the addition of possible example employers. I think that's a really good add. I also wonder if there's an opportunity under skills to add collaboration and communication because it's such an important skill for, I would say, all of these occupations. And then my last comment would be around the description. I'm specifically looking at page 20 for mechanical engineers. And it's very, very specific. And I think as I'm thinking about sharing this with high school counselors and students, it doesn't seem accessible to me. And as a woman engineer who actually has a background in manufacturing, there's no way I would choose that as a description. But something maybe more around taking a systems approach to designing, blah, 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 would be more desirable. Thinking about a big picture system to be able to solve.
Okay.
For. So those would be my comments.
Great.
And it would probably apply to all the engineering
That makes sense.
in here.
And those occupation descriptions are taken from OED's website,
They're taking
which are
the standard occupational classification, the big book that I mentioned at the top, which is published in DC, has no actual warm, inside, like,
Do we have to stick with that?
no, someone would have to do the manual work of
Yeah.
placing what those words would be. So if you wanted something that was not doing this 100 times individually as like heck trying to produce it, then that's one thing. You can just basically run a lookup and plunk this in there. But it is that very clinical language that comes from a classification book and not something that says like this career, not something that kind of warmly invites somebody to want to join that.
Yeah, and if
that
we're thinking
part of the
about
course.
the next generation of young
Yes.
people, we want it to be exciting and accessible.
Yes.
I mean, I think I don't disagree with you at all. I think the challenge is coming up with a occupation description that is both sort of like standardized in a helpful way, but also accessible to a wide audience. And how do you create that accessibility without getting too subjective in the and I think just naming that as a particular tension here with this approach and what we're trying to do is good and something for us to think about how we might address that, because I think it can be a bit of a challenge. So I see some other yellow cards. I'm going to come around. Yeah, if you would put your yellow card in front of your name, that will just tell me that you want to say something.
The actual accessibility to youth was so thank you.
Will you say just a little bit more about?
Yeah, thank you. Graphically, I think it is very accessible to youth, and I think it'll be a really well received, especially sitting down with an adult, a counselor, a teacher, a guide to go through it. Yeah, biggest thing is like that job description, having it. I'm going to spend my life doing this thing. What is this thing I'm going to invest this time and energy in doing? That's really the selling point. It's the same with class descriptions. It's amazing how much that can turn the youth away really quickly. Just the description of the thing, the job, class. So having it a bit more higher level, but yeah, like the background skills you're going to need to do this thing of what it means. You're going to be working with multifaceted teams. You're going to be engaging people with the design process and problem solving, which I know is listed as the skills, but incorporating some of those things into the hard description there. That's kind of all I had to say.
No, I think that's
Yeah.
that's great. Would you pass the mic there to Jared? We might just go down the line.
We got another one there. All right.
Yeah.
I think adding to the skills, I think you hit it on it, Tina, adding soft skills in there, but on the occupation description and further hitting on that a little bit more, but and not only making it sound more exciting, but giving a purpose, like what's the purpose of this job? Like what's the value of this job in society?
Yeah.
And what are you providing as a person to this industry? That goes well in our hiring process and when we share with what the people will be doing. They're not just assembling widgets, they're building custom built products with teams that are going to serve buildings that are going to house children for schools and people for offices and things like that. So that was one thing. The main reason I had my card up was around the economic data also, and just understanding maybe there's some more notes maybe on the bottom of the page we can put, but the hourly wage and the annual wage, are those total comp, those include any kind of profit sharing, bonuses, things like that, or that's just strictly the hourly wage and the average annual wage?
Yeah, so it would be if you took what the average hourly wage is and then you multiply it by 2080, because that's 40 hours year round, which in itself, I like to use hourly wages because we know that the average hours worked per week is somewhere close. Now manufacturing's again different because higher hours per week on average. But average hours per week worked overall in private sector is like 34. So if you assume 40 hours year round and you just take a number for any occupation and hourly wage and multiply it by 2080 and assume full-time year round work, you're overstating it.
Yeah, and I think that's why you got discrepancy between the hourly and the annual
Yes.
too, and by county, just depending on that situation.
Yes. But no, these are not total compensation. Back in the day when we had some more money and some more staff, we did our own benefit survey where we surveyed employers on our own. I did 2 rounds of it. It's one of the most exciting. I love doing special surveys like that and getting direct feedback from employers and having conversations with them. Is we would say, what kinds of benefits are you offering, like retirement, health? How much is that costing you? Open-ended comments about all the different aspects of health, retirement, fringe, and other benefits that were being offered. And the last time we did that was in 2018. There's no publicly available source of information that does total compensation. There's the National Compensation Survey that is national. And so unless we go out and do it our own, there isn't data with that. And it's wages.
And nothing that could be added to the annual mandatory questionnaire.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
No, all the states, it's all of the states and areas that do these. It is the same for everyone.
Got it.
Nationally.
That's a rural active
All right. So I have one high level question maybe for the group. So I think you had said that this is really a first look and primarily focused on high skilled. Is that right?
So the packet is high skilled, high wage, and in demand.
Okay.
So that's when you filter for all those, these are the 15 professions in the sector that you get.
Okay. So I was just curious about how those were defined, because it seems like there's jobs left out that I would categorize in that, under that. And like specifically there's, the mobile heavy equipment mechanics, except engines, but there's not heavy equipment operators.
Yeah.
For instance.
So I mean, we're using Ron, do you want to say a little bit about those definitions?
So the statute says that we're going to need to eventually publish these for all all high skill occupations. So we, I think that's also in your packet, actually. There's a list of all manufacturing occupations that are defined as high skill. And that's the,
At this.
yeah, that's the raw data that we've received from the employment department. So that's the full list of all the occupations in the sector that we will at some point have to go around to publishing. So if you don't see an occupation that you think is high wage, high demand, or really high skill, that's the statute right now.
Do you want me to talk, are you interested in like, how are those cutoffs defined? Like what is high?
Well, again, it's like, is high skill based on your level of education? Is it high skill based on the experience need?
So I will admit, I've been frantically trying to get into the Wi-Fi in here so that I could look up the definition, knowing someone would ask and that they're detailed. And I wanted to be able to read the whole thing. So high skill occupations, can everybody hear me? Yeah.
My voice is already, it's outdoor sports season, so my voice is starting to sound a little bit. Okay, high skill occupations. There's a mix of education or on-the-job training that make up what gets and whether it's a typical education requirement or one to be competitive for the job. So I'm just going to read this and then you can, so that I get it, all of the words right. And then you can ask me if you want me to clarify something. High skill occupations in general are defined as occupations with a typical education level, like the minimum you need to be able to apply for the job. So the typical education level needs to be post-secondary training. So something beyond high school, but less than a bachelor's degree or higher. So that's one way that it gets classified as high skill, or occupations with an apprenticeship as the typical on-the-job training level, or occupations typically needing related work experience or long-term on-the-job training for entry, and post-secondary training, again, something beyond high school, but it doesn't have to be as much as a bachelor's degree in order to be competitive for a job opening. So the typical level is just what I need to be able to apply. The competitive level is what puts me a step ahead of most of the people that are going to apply for the same job as me. Does that help? So I just pulled it off of, it's in the, there's a full spreadsheet like this on qualityinfo.org, and it defines high wage, high skill, and high demand. And it's got these very lovely long definitions for everyone to review. It's under the data tab. So if you go to qualityinfo.org and then go to data, there's an option but there's an actual line item that says high wage, high demand, and high skill occupations. And if you expand it, you can click on the one. I just picked Oregon, but you can pick your favorite region, and you'll get the definitions in any of those spreadsheets.
We'll pull them up here too, because we actually do have them. Sorry. Yeah.
I knew it was coming out,
Yeah.
and the Wi-Fi here is a little tricky, so I've been trying.
Yeah.
I wanted to be ready.
No, I appreciate that, because the other thing that we talked about at the last meeting, the Q1 meeting, the virtual meeting, was kind of where does trucking fit in? And Gail, you kind of presented some information around trucking sometimes is categorized in NAICS codes under manufacturing. If there is kind of trucks owned by that company, and I think that exists throughout this. There is a lot of that owner operated that isn't included in NAICS codes information, which is hard too. And so we're kind of curious about a follow up on that. We don't have to get into it right now, but I just know that was in reviewing the minutes. It reminded me that was part of our conversation. And then kind of how the information is displayed. I was just thinking about how there's we have a hard job ahead of us because manufacturing is so broad, I think, in comparison to some of the other two industry consortiums. And so it might be helpful not only talking about including more employers in here that, have these different types of jobs, but almost like examples of subsectors within kind of the large umbrella of manufacturing, and tying that to like job title, like how somebody would actually find that type of job, not just the generic doesn't really fit NAICS codes title. And then furthering that, even tying that to like the degree path or what the program would be called that you would go to at the university. So just thinking about, I'm not an engineer. My mother and my sister both are, but thinking about, I think there's 3 or 4 different engineering titles on here. I don't see chemical engineering, which is a bit surprising within manufacturing, but thinking about that too, like, is that, what type of engineering program would I go to? Is it classified here, or what type of job would I actually be applying for, and recognizing that there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of types of job titles that have to fit within this, but that type of breakdown might be really important for a student looking at moving into one of these fields.
That makes sense. And I should have noted that in your packet is this larger spreadsheet that has all of the occupations for which we would eventually have one of these profiles for. So like chemical engineer, for example, would eventually get, it just wasn't in that initial poll of those, top 3 metrics. So, but I think the other part here too, that I want to emphasize is, again, that these profiles are about meeting the legislative requirement, the opportunity mapping, what we do with them once they're approved, the connecting to credential and career pathways, building that out, feels very much where we want to take this work anyways. So I think, but it ultimately, because of the legislation, is a separate item from what we're asking today. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear where your interest is. I see Steve there.
So you might have already covered this. So what's the difference between the wage numbers here and then what the number that they're looking for from the legislation?
The legislation just asks for that we establish a wage rate. There isn't a specific type of wage that they're looking for in the legislation, but the task of the industry consortia is to establish wage rates based on established OED data.
And how is that data going to be used by the consortium or whoever once it's collected?
At this point, it would be used to develop and publish these profiles with sort of the consortia's stamp of approval. It would set wage rate standards. And then, is there anything else with the way that the legislation is really written, especially Section 5? Section 5 of HB 3306 is really what we're beholden to. Jennifer, do you have any?
Yeah, for training participants in work-based learning, on-the-job training, and other earn and learn. So projects that are funded, particularly through Future Ready Oregon, other WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act funding, other state grant programs. And so for manufacturing, technology, and healthcare in particular, the idea is that publishing the wage and occupation profiles will increase transparency for training participants, for organizations providing work-based learning, and others. But the consortium, all 3 of them, you all have had great conversations about how this information could be used more broadly than that, but the narrow intent of the legislation was around increasing transparency for training.
Noting where we're at with time, but I'm comfortable bumping some of the next agenda item a little bit, because I think this is really important. So we'll spend some time with this until we can kind of get to an inflection point, perhaps. Jonathan. This one.
Hold on.
There you go.
Yep. Good afternoon. So as a practitioner on the workforce side, our team has on the workforce side has looked at the list, and it helped to frame what was in the sector, right, for them as practitioners when they're working. And they're using the backup to this is the quality info that meets your request, that it literally says, this is the job, this is what it happens. These are all the employers that currently have jobs opened. These are the institutions that can give you training, and these are similar jobs out there. And those are the profiles we pull to give to individuals who are interested to explore. But I think from a workforce standpoint and the practitioners, at least it gave them what's in, because that is the hard part. And if you're trying to be impactful in that from a workforce practitioner standpoint, it's like, what's going to meet the requirements? What is the sectors that I should be watching? And this began to give that frame for that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. There is a backup tool that helps to make the sector sexy. This is not sexy. This is to meet requirements. But we do have quality info as a resource or a tool from our state that helps to create a little more sexy, digestible sort of matrix for people.
Yeah, I would echo that. If you're not familiar with qualityinfo.org, and actually I did mention this in the titles, the hyperlinks there. I think, did we link to, so when they are actually published as web pages, they would link to the quality info profile, which is more robust, has connected directly to education and training providers that have certificates or degrees related to this. Again, the legislation really specifies repackaging data. So we acknowledge, I think, to some degree, not that we're reinventing the wheel necessarily, but I don't know, we're putting like fancy white walls on the wheel or something. Like it's just it's a different way of repackaging that information. It's not really trying to reinvent what the information is or where it's coming from. There we go.
I actually have a question. So I went back and I was looking at the question that you were asking about, why is there only 80 of these in the Mid-Valley? And I'm going through the full list. And like, for example, we've got 80 electrical and electronic engineering technologists and technicians, but the very next line item, electromechanical and mechatronics technologists and technicians, of which there is an additional number, is not there.
It's a slight difference in the SOC. Yeah.
So just as an illustrative example, and with the skills that folks were talking about, and I think you mentioned you have ONET resources, right?
Yeah.
There is much more detailed language. It includes things like creative thinking and collaboration. Those types of things are found in that resource as well, which is not something that we produce, but is something that is available to all of us, as well as another resource that helps maybe try to make this a little more but I'm going to say like something I identify with, as just a person that is interested in what I want to do with my life.
So I was just wondering if we're tied to these occupation listings or if we can recategorize what an occupation is, because, and that's a big thing. I realize it would be redoing the whole thing, but as an engineering technology teacher, we have a big engineering program for Scrove. We do focus on the semiconductor industry because that's the biggest sector in Oregon. And so the way we sort of pitch it is like, we look at the manufacturing sectors and we show those to kids, right? And so I'm just wondering if we could limit occupations by sectors, like in the semiconductor industry, there's processor, technician, engineer. Same kind of thing in a lot of different manufacturing industries. So can you have like high school, 2-year, 4-year degree, what are those wage ranges? And so we're talking about manufacturing directly, right? Because otherwise, when I'm talking with families and students, I'd have to have like 70 of these things. Be like, hey, do you want to be an engineer or do you want to be an electrical engineer, engineering technologist? And so it's just,
you're talking about a more simplified list.
Yeah. And so I realize the problem with that is like our database is indexed differently.
Yes.
Right. But in terms of communicating and encouraging people to go into a sector, I think we may have to rethink that.
Okay. I think that's a helpful comment. Other thoughts? Please.
As I thought about that, I was looking, could you have technicians? And then underneath that, you might have the 3 or 4 or 5 descriptions that are titled technicians. But to John's point, people might, there are lots of different kinds of technicians or engineer, and then maybe some of those other things would come up. So bringing it to a higher level, especially if you're trying to reach educators, families, and, children.
So it sounds like a bit of a recategorization, or like thinking about this taxonomically, perhaps, perhaps than by individual occupations within the sector. Right, interesting. Ken?
On that same vein, I mean, when I looked at the computer numeric controlled tool programmer, my generic term would be a CNC machinist. And I don't know, you know, I don't see machinist in that title at all. I mean, most people wouldn't know it as CNC machinist and wouldn't even know what the CNC acronym stands for. And I think that, you know, when you throw in machinists, then you not only have programmers, but you have operators, you have tool and die people, you have manual operators of those equipment. So I just think some of these could be expanded, even electrician. I don't know how, you know, electrician, maybe including LMEs in there, which I assume you would, which would be a different license of electrician, not necessary journeyman. Could also include a supervisor, could be a plant journeyman. There's certain levels, and I assume that even includes apprenticeships to some degree, because that's the only way you're really gonna get to that license program. So I just think some of these could be expanded slightly, just in title, or maybe include more common knowledge or common language when it comes to some of those grades. But and on another note, Gail, since I finally got you, I really appreciate the data that you put out on a, I believe, a monthly basis through those emails. I do appreciate it.
We do have excellent economists at the OED. We're really lucky to have them, and we appreciate them on the consortium. Rebecca, and then I'll call Christy.
Just one thought in terms of a recommendation. One would be on the first page, in addition to listing the hourly wage range, to list the annual wage range there, just because I think it might be useful to see holistically across the state what that number is. And then two, in thinking about these as sort of, if they were printed or online, the ability to, if someone wants to drill down, I don't know if qualityinfo.org has this, but even just thinking about where we can disaggregate from a locality perspective to drill down into county, maybe county or community level, where we have enough data to do that. Is there an ability to have a Power BI or an interactive tool to drill down by locality? Just because I don't know if there's a statutory sort of like, what is the definition of locality? Is it the workforce board region, or is it, how deep does locality go?
Isn't there a statute, like a?
Ronan, was there a statutory definition of locality?
So this is one of the things we wrestled with when we were sort of starting this work, is that there is actually an existing statutory definition of locality that's used by BOLI in relation, the Bureau of Labor and Industries, in relation to prevailing wage rates. But the regions that definition of locality breaks the state into don't map onto the regions that OED publishes their wage data for. So we decided we were going to align with OED in order to, match the legislation. So.
Hey, Christy.
This has kind of come up a couple of times in different ways, but in addition to like examples of industry, local industry that a human can be like, oh, I know where that is, I can work here. A list of the training providers. So if they're, I don't know, even down to high school, like what high schools are offering mechatronics and doing that kind of overlap of data, is the curriculum right, for that occupation? Or if it's an associate's degree, where are the training providers in scope to kind of the need?
Yeah, I see that as absolutely part and parcel of this work. You wouldn't be surprised, Christy, perhaps, but you would be surprised how difficult it is to get accurate information about where these credentialing pathways and programs actually exist in the state. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but I think it's part of what the work needs to entail as we advance it. And I think looking at where we're at in time, what I want to kind of bring us back. Did anybody have any last maybe comments, something that really they wanted to share? And we have some options here. I'm going to break those options down, but I want to make sure that everybody's had a chance to respond to what we're looking at.
It's really brief.
Okay.
it's more of a curiosity. So I'm wearing two hats at this meeting. I'm wearing the hat of an executive director of a local workforce board. You'll see us up in the corner with this very not attractive brown color. And then I'm also the chair of the Oregon Workforce Partnership, which is the association of the 9 local boards. So my question is, you've got Portland, Tri-County combined, and I'm just curious about that because Clackamas Workforce Partnership is its own local board. So just wanted clarity on that.
This is not wholly my fault, but it is partially my fault. And the reason is because in my prior position with the employment department, when I was the person that was doing those long-term industry projections, one of the things that happened is that we published more regions than we did now. Another one, if anybody in here from the South Coast also wants to be upset with me, this is the time. Because Douglas County and South Coast used to be broken out, and Clackamas County and Multnomah, Washington used to be broken out. But when I went through and did a detailed, but backwards facing look at what we were doing, we were either suppressing or just borrowing. How do I describe this? The phrase I want to say is borrowing a staffing pattern, but if there's not enough data for an area, then what we do is say, well, we think maybe it's about roughly the same as the state of Oregon. And so when we got to that threshold where we were either not able to publish something, or what we were doing was just assuming that whatever was happening in Clackamas County or the South Coast was the same as the state 70% of the time, we weren't actually publishing data that was true to that region anymore. There wasn't enough information to do that. And so I recommended, this was several years ago, that we combine those two because it increased our publishing, our ability to share even this much. Before that, there was less that we could share for those smaller areas. So it gives them more information. Yes, you have to share. I know Clackamas County is different than Portland, and I know that the South Coast is not the same as Douglas, but it increases the power that we have to share information at all.
Great, thank you. That makes sense.
I think we're at a point where I want to try to move the conversation somewhat forward, but let me lay out the land for us a little bit here in terms of what our options are as a consortium and how we've been thinking about this and sort of just some of my high level reactions to what's being shared. So there's a couple of things. In a minute, I am going to ask for you to just hold up your cards and we'll see if we get to consensus on the request of just approving this initial set as is. Now, what that doesn't mean is that this initial set exists as it is in front of you in perpetuity. In fact, what we can certainly commit to doing is coming back at Q3 with some of the feedback we've gotten from here and some of the feedback I'm sure that we'll get from the other consortia, like I said, as well, right? Since we need this to be sort of consistent across all 3 consortia. So even if you approve this initial set today, it does not mean that this is just what it is for all time. We can make changes to these and beyond. As a reminder, in a minute when I ask you to hold up your card, if we are not 100% green, and it's fine if we're not 100% green, I will ask the ELT to make a specific motion for a vote, and we'll just do a majority yes or no. We do need to have a record of taking a vote on this. The legislature is asking us to do a task, right? So we need to be able to indicate that we are doing that task. I think there's a lot of iteration that can be made here. One of the things that I want to make a pitch to, and we've kind of lost the agenda item. I don't know that we're going to get the working group update today the way that I had hoped. I think, thinking about like what we've talked about with occupation descriptions, thinking about how we're categorizing things, thinking about this goal to make these legible and accessible, I would really love for one of the working groups to sort of bring their perspective and lens to these and think about how we could humanize perhaps for lack of a better word some of these profiles between now and Q3, and then what we would come back to you with in Q3, or again just in the way that these reflect some of the feedback that we got at Q1, what we would come back to you at Q3 would hopefully reflect some of that feedback as well. But the working groups provide us a kind of engine so that the consortium is actually continuing to work on this in the months between these quarterly meetings. If that's just so you know what we're about to do in the next couple of minutes, what I'll ask now is if you would hold up your card as to whether or not you would approve this initial set of occupation and wage profiles for the manufacturing sector. Just hold it up, and it's okay if it's not green. Okay, I've got one yellow, which I'm wondering, Amanda, can you share with us what it might be? What is there something we could do to get you to green?
Yeah, I just am curious about the trucking piece.
Okay.
Some of the other, I mean, we had a lot of comments today about kind of high level like reorganization. And so, you know, we're going to get to all these things, but I mean, there's just NAICS codes, I think they're completely missing, even on the list that we got. Like there's nothing in the 81 series.
So if we were to commit. So if we commit in Q3 to making sure that trucking has some presence in this set of occupational profiles, that feels like something that is acceptable for us to do. And I think it makes total sense. I mean, yeah, do we have manufacturing without trucking? I don't think we do. But yeah, it's not something we were preparing for today.
And we're not distributing this table today.
Yes. Yeah, that table is just for wider context. So you can see where we're headed, but that's not the approval. The approval is the stapled packet of the occupational profile. So I guess one more time, would you hold up your cards if you are willing to approve this initial set of occupation and wage data? And you can also remember, you can stand back. You know, you can say like,
I mean, I'm still yellow. Yellow doesn't mean I'm going to get in the way of.
Okay.
So,
okay.
I mean,
then that feels like consensus. That's great. I just wanted to make sure that we address what it was. So great. Awesome. Then let's move on. We do have a little bit of time before our break for talking about working groups. And Kathy, do you mind if I just speed us through that piece?
Feel free.
Okay. So as you recall at Q1, we stood up 2 working groups. One of the working groups, Accelerating Access, was not able to meet before the Q2 meeting, but the other working group, Reducing Barriers, had a really great substantive meeting last Thursday, actually, where we just did some table setting around what we felt like in that working group our priorities would be. I really think, and those of you that signed up for the Accelerating Access working group, and I would pitch those of you that didn't sign up for a working group to think about getting in contact with me. I'm really going to suggest strongly that the Accelerating Access group really take up these occupational profiles, and hearing what we've heard today, to think about some of that accessibility, legibility piece with that. So I think that will be an action item that we take up in that working group. But I did want to share with you a little bit of what the Reducing Barriers working group talked about. When we go to the next slide for me. So what we did, we spent some time just identifying major issues that we felt like this working group could advance some strategies for, bring to the consortium, and get your feedback. And that's the push and pull of the working group structure, right? That we'll meet as working groups between the quarterly meetings, but we'll come to the quarterly meetings sort of talking about what we talked about, what our questions are, and where we need some feedback from you all to make sure that we're on the right track. So a couple of things that I think are important. We really feel like there are some key information gaps that then turn into barriers in terms of access into the workforce. So, you know, particularly, and we've talked about this multiple times in this group, just the nature of working in manufacturing, right? That the reality of it often doesn't match what is in people's heads. So how can we address that as an information gap? We talked about this just a second ago. Where and how to access industry relevant credentials and training, right? Like that's a challenge in the state. And how can employees access support services in their area, right? So not just where you get your training, but once you find a job, you know, it can be, that doesn't solve all your problems. And the high level of turnover, particularly in the first couple of weeks of the employment in the manufacturing sector, often relies on knowledge of where those support services are, and employers don't always know where that is. So thinking about how we can make that more transparent as well. And then just generally speaking about, I think Tina, it makes me think of your point with just like adding in some basic communication skills. Like, what are the life and professional skills that are necessary, perhaps for all occupations, that we can help students and families understand that these will be broadly important skills to be working on throughout their educational career, K through 12 into college. If you'll advance, please. We had some thoughts about how we might address these issues. So thinking through, and if you'll just keep advancing until the whole slide's up. We want to connect more manufacturing employers to the public workforce system. So how do we get more employers at the table? Those of you that are here today representing employers, you have a really powerful voice in this work. And the more of you that we can engage in the public workforce conversation, the easier it is for us to address these information gaps. So really, that's one of our key tasks, we feel like, is getting more folks to the table there. And then how can we support for some of that life professional skill training, whether that's about helping to identify where it's happening. I know a lot of our CDOs do a lot of this. Obviously, a lot of our education and training providers do a lot of this, but like making those connections and those pathways, not just again to credentials, but to key and important skills. How can we smooth those pathways? And then generally speaking, I think it's somewhat related to this, but we see it as a bigger task with these occupational profiles, is making this information more legible, but thinking about it in ways that make sense, particularly for students and families, but then also thinking about it from an employer perspective as well, which is challenging, right? Like looking at this system and these problems from those two perspectives don't always lend themselves to the same solution. So being really nuanced in how we navigate those things. So I think just to give you a sense of where we are in that working group and where we'll kind of be going forward, I think we have time. If anybody has any quick reactions, like, hey, it would be great if you guys did X, Y, and Z, or, you know, if you're going to call yourselves the Reducing Barriers Working Group and you're not talking about blank, any kind of high level reactions to what we're sharing there. Awesome. We're just ready for lunch, I think. Which we'll break for here in a second. But really, I do want to, again, pitch these working groups as a place where, frankly, the HEC staff could use some of your perspective, expertise on some of the things that we talked about today with these occupation profiles. And we are committed to coming back at Q3 with revised versions of this, but it would, I think, we would be able to move that needle so much more if y'all were willing to give your perspective on, like, what is a more humanizing occupation description? Can we find that balance between the language that we need and language that makes sense to somebody who's just encountering this for the first time? So consider that. If you're interested, just shoot me an email and I'll get you connected. We meet once a month, the working groups do, for an hour virtually. And we'll just kind of keep that cadence between the quarterly meetings. So thanks. I think it's a good time to break for lunch. And I did see it get delivered there. So it's 11:30. What we're gonna do is have you break for lunch, help yourselves to what's in the back there. And then we, in the meantime, are going to be setting up for a really exciting panel with the Hillsborough Youth Apprenticeship folks. And we'll start that here at about 11:40. Maybe 11:45. We want to give people time to settle back in, but it'll be a learning lunch. So help yourselves, and we'll see you back in a little bit. The opportunity, what's working, and frankly, what's maybe not always been working, or what's been faltering, I should say, the obstacles. We have 4 luminaries, really, that I want to introduce you to. Kathy Bishop, the Human Resources Director from Dara Semiconductor, is here. Travis Reidman, the Superintendent for Hillsborough School District. Claudia Rizzo, the Youth Apprenticeship Manager from the school district. And then Christy Wilson, who is the Workforce Development Director at PCC, but you were sort of involved in it when you were at the city of Hillsborough, right? So, so I'm going to turn it over to them. Claudia is going to kind of walk you through the Hillsborough Youth Apprenticeship. If you're not familiar with this program, she's going to give you the 101 on it. And then we have some questions, and I think hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A from the panel. But yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to Claudia.
Get started. So, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Claudia Rizzo, Youth Apprenticeship Project Manager. And I was brought up into this project in early 2022 when this initially kicked off with Travis and Christy Wilson kind of spearheading the project. And it stems from years of conversations. I think I recall being in an initial meeting in my previous role with the school district as project manager, working with CT teachers and kind of hearing this initially. And they did some work in trying to learn from other states and what was being done in terms of youth apprenticeship. And so we really had the opportunity to kickstart this program. I was hired on through a partnership with the Hillsborough School District and the city of Hillsborough, and they fund my position. And so I have an opportunity today to kind of share about how we started, where we are now, and the opportunities that lie ahead for youth apprenticeship. So the program structure for youth apprenticeship is very similar to an adult program in terms of the components that make up the program. And so we have it's really employer driven. So the employer will hire the apprentices as one of their own employees. And there's the on-the-job learning that takes place at the company. And then we have the classroom learning component that is part of our CTE programming at the high school level. And so when we look at the apprenticeship program structure, it is the same in terms of registering it with the state. And our program is now currently the only youth apprenticeship program registered with Bully. And so it really looks the same in terms of leading to a nationwide credential that's recognized by the Department of Labor. And so the students that go through the program upon successful graduation and completion of the program will walk away with a certification in their occupation. So there's a lot of great stats out there in terms of benefits of participating in a youth apprenticeship and an apprenticeship as a whole. And so when we look at the benefits for both the participants and the companies, I think that those numbers really speak for themselves. And so when we look at the average earning in terms of an apprentice that's been through a program, it's over $300,000 over the lifetime in increased earnings. And so there's a huge also number in terms of employment retention. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we talk about the experiences of our students and what has been really proven through the process of this program. But this is all information that has been done through case studies across the states. And I think we're in a really great position with Oregon and having kind of launched this youth apprenticeship program in terms of the number of opportunities that lie out there to continue building upon what we've kind of established in Hillsborough. So there's obviously a really high amount of great feedback that has been received through the program in terms of the benefits and why it matters. And so I think the employers that have been participating and have been involved with the design of the program have really made it clear that this is a really great way to prepare our future talent and to really take from what's being done at the school district level and kind of building upon that, especially for students that might not look at college or university as their first initial step after high school. We've also learned that youth apprentices through the program have really built a lot of loyalty to their employers. We'll hear from Kathy share a little bit about what her experience has been like working with the students in the FABs. But we really see this high level of excitement of students, particularly because for many of them, all of them so far, this has been their first job. And so there's a lot of a lot of great energy that comes from kind of proving themselves and making themselves feel like they are part of a team in the FAB, which is really great and beneficial to the students overall. So here is a photo of our first inaugural cohort. They all graduated in June 2024. But again, we retain 100% of them, which is, I thought, was a big accomplishment working with students. We recruited them to be part of the program when they were only 15 years old and sophomores in high school. And then they started working as the apprentices when they turned 16, which was one of the requirements for the program. But it really highlights the need that we have to build partnerships between education, the hands-on learning, our employers, and really preparing the students for careers in the future. And so I think one of the things that was a key takeaway in working with this group of students is when I initially started talking to them about this opportunity, for many of them, they didn't really know what manufacturing was. They just knew about the opportunity that was being presented, how much they were going to be able to make, kind of what the schedule would look like. But for all of them, it was kind of a brand new experience into a field that was really unknown to them. And so in preparation for them to start as part of the program, we did a tour of the fab, and we were all able to go and dress down completely in the bunny suits and be able to spend time in the clean room. And so it was really kind of a initial reaction, and they all decided to stay on and be a part of the program for the 2 years. So what makes youth apprenticeship unique is that we're obviously working with high school students that are just turning 16 years old. They probably never had a job, probably have never been through an interview process or put together a resume. And so that's one of the things that I am able to support them with, is just that mentorship of, here, this is what the job application looks like. These are the screenings that you have to do, and kind of walking them through that process. They also must be on track to graduate. So we continuously monitor how they're doing in school in terms of their academics, their attendance. If there's any concerns with that, we're able to address that with them promptly. Students were able to work during their school day. And so we work closely with the counselors and with their employers to figure out a schedule that works for them. So for many of them during their junior year, they go to school in the morning and then do their apprenticeship in the afternoon, or vice versa. And then once they go into their senior year, where they have more flexibility in their schedule, they're able to work a longer full 8-hour shift every other day. And so it really does add up in terms of how much they're making and the experience they're able to gain from the apprenticeship. So that's a photo of our current cohort. So they started this fall and are really doing excellent work. So just to kind of highlight some of the benefits of employers that have participated, when we kicked off the program, we did have 2 companies on board, so Gyra Semiconductor and Toso Quartz. And Toso was unable to continue to hire students just because capacity within the company, which is something that was definitely a learning curve for me. But we were able to onboard the 4 students that we had with Gyra. But we definitely, I just keep continuously in meeting with mentors and lead trainers and the HR managers from the company, just really hear about how great it is to have students and how refreshing it is for the culture of the company to be able to have that experience in mentoring a young student. And so there's obviously access to workforce that we're building. We're building community ties. The partnerships continue to grow. So for example, with Gyra, they not only host and hire our apprentices, but they also collaborate closely with us in providing tours for other classrooms and other CTE programs, and work with us in the chamber at the local level with having interns be a part of their company during the summers and whatnot. So we definitely find other ways to collaborate with those that are at the table and willing to be of support for us. And obviously for the students, there's a lot of benefits that come from being a part of the apprenticeship. they're really gaining real hands-on experience. They're in a real job. They take that very seriously, and with a lot of responsibility. The way that the program is set up is that there is a wage progression. And so as they're progressing through the program, they're continuing to kind of increase in the wages, and they're currently starting off at 1847 as their starting wage, which is very, yeah, it's a great incentive for students as we're marketing the program. And with our previous cohort, one of our apprentices graduated, and he was making closer to $25 an hour. And so that was just, a great example of what this program can do for the students, especially those that are kind of trying to balance their support to the families and other obligations, and to be a part of this program has really supported that as well. Again, there's the National Industry Certification that the students walk away with when they graduate, which is a huge incentive and something that they can really, will really set them apart from their other students. We had 2 students that actually earned quite substantial scholarships, and it's not just attributed to the program, but it was definitely something that helped boost their confidence and their applications as they were seeking funding for continuous education. So currently we have the occupation of certified manufacturing technician as one that is registered with BOLI for our program. We're working closely with JIRA and continuously doing outreach with other local industry partners to try to get them engaged and hopefully expand the program so that the student opportunities can expand as well. And again, this program is in partnership with the school district. So I kind of work as a liaison between all of the parties, directly with the students and their families, their teachers, counselors, et cetera, to kind of make sure that things are going smoothly for everyone. So we do have a video clip that we recorded last year when we still had our first inaugural cohort. So you'll hear from Reese Bond and about his experience, and will kind of lead us into the panel discussion.
I am a senior at Century High School, and I work for Tosa Quartz as a glass blower. So far, the apprenticeship program has been a really great opportunity for me. Originally, I wasn't planning on participating in the program, but my teacher, Mr. Lown, talked me into joining, or at least applying to the program, and I found it was something that I really liked. That had an opportunity to be a glass blower, and it sounded like an interesting field for me. The apprenticeship program has really helped me find out what I wanted to do as a career. I didn't really know what I wanted to do after high school, going into senior year, and after I joined the apprenticeship program and started working around some of the engineers and some of the more design-oriented people, I found that I wanted to be kind of working in that field. About a year ago into the program, I got promoted from training onto working on the shop floor and working on production parts for the company. I think the apprenticeship program is a really great opportunity for everybody. They're super flexible around your school schedule, like your classes, your extracurriculars. Like I do multiple sports, and I've been able to work around all of that. And it's a job in high school that pays pretty well. So I think it's a great opportunity for everyone. It's really opened up an entire industry that I didn't even know existed. Before they came into our school and talked to us about semiconductors, I didn't know what that was. And for the industries themselves, they're getting new, fresh people out of high school who are willing to work, and it kind of just helps them replace maybe people that are leaving the company, people that are retiring, just a new batch of people ready to get into the industry.
It's a great video. Thank you, Claudia, for that introduction. And I remember what I made at 19, and it wasn't $25 an hour. So I think we appreciate you presenting on this really unique opportunity, and I'm hoping that you all on the panel will give us all a sense of, I think, Claudia, you touched on what makes the apprenticeship unique. I'm curious if you all would talk about what makes it uniquely challenging as well, in terms of setting up, in terms of running, anything that sort of strikes you in that question. So whoever would like to start. And that might need to be turned on.
First of all, thanks for having us. Excuse me, my name's Travis, and I'm the superintendent at the Hillsborough School District, and have been on this journey for a while. And I show up here at these meetings because I think this is one of the most important things we can be talking about in Oregon is how do we change the game and career pathways for students. I think having folks like John and Claudia from K-12 on this consortium team is super important. And I'm talking about this with superintendents across the state, the work that you do here, as well as the tech and healthcare consortium work. I think it's super important. So thanks for even a seat at the table. I got into this because I went to a conference in Nashville where they were talking about apprenticeship, and I learned that states like Wisconsin and Tennessee were breaking ground in doing youth apprenticeship, and that in fact a K-12 school district could be the intermediary to develop an apprenticeship standard. So I came back to Oregon and I carried around in my backpack for weeks this apprenticeship standards for machinist and CNC mill operator. Interestingly, we started the conversation today with why can't CNC be like a program that kids get into? Because at our high schools and Forest Grove High School, we have kids doing 3D printing, CNC routing, plasma cutting, all kinds of additive and subtractive manufacturing processes. And they're also doing engineering and design cycles. And so why can't these 16, 17, 18-year-olds get a credential upon graduation and get into the workforce? And then years later, fast forward, Claudia and Christy and Kathy and team, we have our credential here for the state of Oregon, this hefty packet, which proves that an industrial manufacturing technician can be credentialed upon graduation in an Oregon high school, and that those students can be paid along the way rather than having to make choices like working at Burger King, which isn't a bad choice. I've worked in restaurants my early career. And but instead can focus on their passion and their career pathway while they're 16, 17, or 18, and then graduate just that far ahead. I think we've swung real far in education, and this is my fault, toward you go to college or you've come up short of our expectations for you as a student. And I think now we need to swing back, and we are swinging back toward what is the ecosystem within different industries, and what are the required credentials to get there? What are their work experiences to get there, to have a meaningful career, and to support a family if that's what you choose to do? And for my higher ed friends, I'm not knocking for your graduation. And I think there's a role for all of us with stackable pieces and career trajectories. In answer to your question, Nick, the problem that we ran into was that the perception of industry partners, and maybe Kathy could speak to this, is that isn't it illegal for 16-year-olds to work in a fab? Like, what we've been told that we can't have violations of child labor laws and that we can't endanger youth, et cetera, et cetera. So we actually did some, early on, we hit these walls we didn't expect, and we learned things I never expected to learn. Like, you can go on the Department of Labor site and find what is illegal for kids to do. And it's like explosives manufacturing and slaughterhouses. And there's like 8 other things. In Hillsborough, we don't have those businesses. We do have a rich ag and farming community, and kids do that work, but they just don't do it on anybody's watch. So, is this being recorded? So anyway, the long story short, some of the recommendations that I have about where we could focus our efforts is in streamlining the process for school districts, community colleges, industry partners to stand up apprenticeships. A lot of apprenticeships already exist because of that unions have a tradition of apprenticeship as a workforce development strategy. But in the case of Gyra Semiconductor, for example, there isn't an apprenticeship that's available. We built one, and the theory is that if you can demonstrate competency, you can develop an apprenticeship. So it sounds easy, but there are challenges like going and registering that and making sure that folks understand the documentation that goes along with having a journey worker work alongside a young person, just like they would have to if they were not young. So there's actually not that much different between a youth apprenticeship and a registered apprenticeship. They're all the same, actually, with just maybe a couple extra pages for youth. I think it's important for us to understand that and to spread the word about it.
So from industry standpoint, how many of you in industry have a policy that says, or in all of your customer audits get asked the question about, do you employ anyone under the age of 18? Industry, anybody? First hurdle, right? We're going to bring 16-year-olds into manufacturing. There's really nothing prohibiting it. You just have to change your policy and your way of thinking, and a lot of people's way of thinking. Our general manager for our production area, after we started on this path, looked at me and said, "You're going to bring 16-year-olds into my manufacturing floor?" You know, with people, yeah. And again, now he is the one speaking about this, loving it, thinks it's the best program ever. Our company is owned by Alpha and Omega Semiconductor. It purchased the gyro site in 2012 under our founder's direction to bring manufacturing back to the United States. And we've been doing that for 13 years through programs like this. We're in technology, you're in technology. Our job is to innovate, right? You innovate your technology. We have to innovate our way of thinking and how we bring workforce in. Over the last 5 to 10 years, high schools were not providing people walking in the door because nobody knew what it was, because we were absent. We weren't there talking about it. They weren't seeing it. So our mandate is to try to change that way of thinking. Youth apprenticeship is one of those programs that allows kids to come in working. They don't do a lot of hours at first. So, you know, you have to create your program. You do that slowly. The first group helped us do that. So, you know, a little rougher for them. Second group, these folks are already, you know, they started in the fall and they're already getting certified on equipment, and they'll be able to spend their summer doing 40 hours for us. So it's going, and we're learning as we go, and we're willing to share that to others so that, you know, you can take that and don't learn the hard way like we did. But it's your mindset that has to change, and the mindset is say yes to it, then go tell your management we're going to do it. Okay. And then take it forward.
All right. I think something that's unique about this is how it started about 70 years ago. We've merged a lot of funding for it. Like we've used ARPA funding, and then Future Ready Oregon came, and we were able to leverage that. We had Intel, even though they weren't going to participate, they gave funding when they had it. And then the city of Hillsborough kind of helped facilitated some of that. So able to fund a position, taking some, I mean, it's kind of about removing barriers, right? And a lot of the school districts folks having a willing teacher that was able to do it, and willing was awesome. So everything kind of fell into place. I know Ken Madden was there at the beginning too, chatting. So I think that just being innovative and partnerships are what make it happen. I mean, some of from where I am, and I just left the city of Hillsborough, so I'm wearing kind of two hats, I guess, but is just the industry of recruitment, like they said. And you know, we this year had more students than spots, which is very unfortunate. There's a couple different reasons I think that contributed to that, both bully related, that hopefully won't happen again. But we also then launched an adult apprenticeship too, and it seems like industry isn't quite even jumping at that either. So can't quite figure out that piece, but I think this is an amazing model, and hoping that's something that we can replicate throughout the state.
And I'll just add a little bit in terms of the unique challenges that come with working with the high school students that we might not think about initially with other apprentices that are adults. And transportation is definitely a big one. These students, for most of them, they wouldn't be able to participate if we weren't able to provide transportation to the company and then back home. And so we were able to secure a vehicle through a bully grant, which is now housed at the transportation center. And we have funds from a separate grant, Future Ready Oregon, that is enabling us to hire a part-time driver. And so they get picked up from school, they drive them to their job, and then they get picked up either by our driver or our transportation department and through our activities bus and taken back home. There's other logistical things that come to mind in terms of the scheduling piece. A lot of our students, we don't want to take away from other opportunities that they're engaging with outside of school and the apprenticeship. And so really working closely with our teachers and our counselors to be able to accommodate for them has really been huge. And so there definitely comes a lot of, I feel like I'm a mom almost in my role at the school because I do get calls like, our driver's running 5 minutes late, what do I do? Or our bus is not here. And so problem solving, a lot of those is something that I do on a daily basis and something that I really enjoy as well.
I've got a couple more questions, but then I do, you know, as you're listening, hopefully you're thinking of some questions you want to ask the panel too. I'm curious if you all see a role for the consortium to play in supporting the development or implementation of supporting this youth apprenticeship. What role can this body play in potentially supporting the development of youth apprenticeships elsewhere in the state?
I think initially when I think of that question, advocacy is a huge one. I think that more that we are able to talk about opportunities like the youth apprenticeship and make it known that it has been done, that it's working, and it's been really positive both for our employer and our students is really a huge win. I think I talk about my work in kind of many spaces that I go just because I'm able to share with community that might not be well aware about the opportunities that lie in Hillsborough in manufacturing. And so I try to highlight not only the industry, the opportunities that are accessible and making them more accessible to our broader community is something that I feel like I do in my day-to-day and something that I think we can all do in this different spaces that we are in.
One thing that kind of comes up for me is just having like a more regional group. This is very Hillsborough focused and built around a long history of partnerships with the city and the school district in Hillsborough. So yeah, it is replicable and scalable, but having some sort of like decision, like, is this something we're going to do for Oregon? Like, let's either be in or be out. I mean, it's a heavy lift, but if we don't have industry, if industry isn't interested in participating, it's like, why? So like just some industry feedback, looking at different models, and then having just a place for like shared resources where this group could potentially access or share in a sort of way.
So I guess if you look at the support as a company that we had by doing this program, that's where I think that bridge of, you know, support with BOLI, you know, we wouldn't have thought this hard to do this by ourselves. I don't have a Claudia that I Lynn, that's pretty close, but, you know, somebody that's going to really champion and do the lifting, do the paperwork, do the stuff that none of us have time to do. In this format, you have that advantage because everybody mentoring a 16-year-old, 17-year-old in the manufacturing, it kind of rekindles their interest in their job too. So, you know, that really gives us more. But without the resources, without the people that were willing to fight for the program and keep the program going, and that's where, you know, industry, take a look at it because we're all about getting free help, right? We don't have the head count. We've got to do things with the resources we have. These are the programs that give you that.
My recommendations for this group would be a little more structural. I think I want to give a shout out to Ken and Jonathan and Steve, who are all mentors to me in figuring out what the heck is going on with the system in Oregon when I was trying to get into it and figure out how to make progress for our school district. I learned that on one side, you got the HEC and the education department and all that under the governor. And on the other side, you've got the Bureau of Labor and Industry with its own democratically elected leader. And then the apprenticeship and training division is in there. And because it's a regulatory agency, BOLI has its own responsibilities. And if we're tentative to go to them to help us create apprenticeships, that's a difficult structural problem. And so I'd advocate for a liaison. I've talked to Nick about this, and I'm really glad you're in your role, Nick. I think we need communication. If there's, say, a grant coming to us to develop apprenticeship, we need to know whether it goes to the HEC and some with education leaders, or whether it goes to the apprenticeship and training division, which approves apprentices, but doesn't really at this point have the staff to go out and create apprenticeships. So that's something that I've talked about with the Workforce and Talent Development Board as well. And I share that thought with everybody who will listen, because I think in Oregon, we have some structures that we sit within and we feel powerless to cross over into the other sets of work. The other one would be for this group to set metrics. I loved what we were talking about today with the data regarding CNC routers. We should, with Forest Grove and Hillsborough, we should know exactly that there are 46 job openings coming up with CNC routers, and we should have 20 of them coming from Hillsborough and 20 of them coming from Forest Grove within the next year. And if you all could help advocate for the setting of metrics that cause us to do the right behaviors, that would help. Because otherwise we're just publishing all this information and then praying that it works, that people show up at the fab to do the work. I think if education systems, including K-12, could be accountable for being part of hitting those goals for credentialing and all that, whatever level it's accomplished at, I think that would be really healthy for our system. I think in Oregon, we don't hold ourselves accountable for metrics very often. We do a lot of really good work with the spirit of hope. And then I would also say advocacy at the national level. If we're going to bring manufacturing back to the United States, then we've got to figure out who creates the manufacturing workforce. And I'm all for it, but just setting up like an isolationist approach to becoming a great manufacturing country can't work unless we have an influx educational planning that happens so that we can create workforce at all levels, from engineers down to technicians, to work in our different sectors. So if this group is Oregon leaders, the WTDB could work together and figure out how do we position ourselves to benefit from anything that happens nationally to help us get manufacturing to the front in Oregon. That would be healthy for our state, I think.
It can feel like magic when it's working, but it doesn't happen by magic, right? It requires a lot of thought and planning. I have some other questions, but I really do want this to be a back and forth with the consortium and the panel. So I would open it up now to questions. Benton, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Benton Strong from Bigger. Thank you for this presentation. It's awesome. I read it before, and it's great. I have two questions. One's kind of directed at you, Catherine, then another one maybe more broadly. One of the biggest challenges that our company has, and Christy probably knows this pretty well because she's with us, is how do we staff this internally when we do things like this? And so I'm interested from your perspectives from how you have done that, both from the probably a little easier once you figure out what your shop foreman or whoever that is can do, but the day-to-day, how you engage with folks outside the company to make sure the program moves forward, and then how do you translate that information internally is a big thing we've struggled with. So it'd be really interesting to hear your perspective on that. Then the second one is probably for anyone is what happens to the kids when they're done? And I think you just made a great point about we need people at every level. Like, are they getting grabbed by you in your current job, Christy? Say, how can we upskill you? Like, what do they do when they're done with the program?
So I'll start. There you go. So how do you staff it? It's like anything else. It has a lot of value. So you have to decide you're going to put resources into it. But because it's already developed and you can take that print and use it, there's a lot less time for anybody coming into it now. Now, as far as internally creating your program, that's where your time is going to go. But realize they're coming to you, and some of them have after school, so you may have them 2 days a week, 2 hours to start with, right? And so you're having to fill in their time very slowly. So you take your current, how do you train your new people, certifications, and you break it into pieces. So once you have that blueprint, that's how you're going to bring them in. You're going to have your mentors that are going to work with them based on that, and you're going to move them through that. So that upfront time when you first start is heavy. And, you start to see that, you can use the same thing. You're going to do the same thing, right? And they're learning from people on the floor. So you're doing the same kind of training you do with other people. You're just having them do a little bit more watching than you would with someone else. They do quite a bit of classroom at the beginning. You know, you're going to do your safety training. Well, think of your regular orientation, all the safety training you have to do with them. If you're only there 2 to 4 hours a week, it's going to take a while to get through just your basic stuff. While you're doing that, you're scrambling to make sure you have everything else in place. So the internal part, once it's in place, you know, you can repeat it and it's amazing.
Yes, to address the question about what happens to the students, where do the students go? So I think what makes youth apprenticeship also unique is that maybe with adults that are participating in an apprenticeship, their ultimate goal is maybe to stay with the company full time. Like they're in the program to get trained, to be able to get a full-time job as an employee. With students, I feel like that is the goal, right? That is the goal of the company, to be able to invest in the students so that the students stay with them as full-time employees. But our high school students are also working to identify what their interests are. Is this something that is a career for me? Is this a good fit? And so from our initial cohort that we had 5 students. 2 of them, through the course of the program, were able to identify that they wanted to pursue their bachelor's. And that was something that they were thinking about already. The other 2 are at Portland Community College doing a 2-year degree. And then the 5th one is an employee for Gyra Semiconductor. So he stayed with the company as a full-time employee. And so I think it's important to continue to have those conversations with our students. Like, this is the goal, right? For you to be able to stay, and you'll have that opportunity if that's something you wish to do. But also take this opportunity to learn about yourself, about what it is you are really interested in. What is something that you're going to be enjoying? You know, when they're high school seniors and they're working 8-hour jobs, they get a really good sense of like, is this something that I'm going to continue to do long-term, or is this maybe not a good fit? And so I was able to have really honest conversations about these topics with the students, and they were really willing to share and say, you know what, I really enjoyed my time here, but I don't think this is going to be for me. And there was other students like Reese who shared, he was interested initially in welding and was really passionate about that, something that he did with his father. But going through the program, he was able to see engineers that were maybe doing a lot of the preparation work and design work. And so that was an area of interest for him that he's now pursuing. And so it's a little bit different, I think, when working with students. But ultimately, I think that our goal is to be able to kind of plant that seed. For many of them, they'll come in the summer and they will likely seek out a job that is going to pay them really well while they're here on break. And so they at least have that loyalty built up with the company that they've been able to develop through the program.
One more comment that might be relevant to this group. I was thinking about Reese when we were talking about our packet earlier about the NAIC codes and all that stuff. I was wondering, like, glassblower, where does that fit? And under semiconductor processing technicians, which somebody referenced earlier, there's all like putting the ingots in the thing and putting the gas in there. So the glass blowing thing is like these cylinders that are, you put wafers of silicon into these cylinders and you fill the cylinders with gas to like protect them for transportation. Am I getting this sort of right? Sort of right. Anyway, this guy is like, his interests are diverse, like welding. He's getting his hands on and inside the sector. I think it's important when we look at the description of the skills and underneath here that like glassblower would not show up, I don't think, when we process what the code is and what the occupational description is. And I appreciated the conversation earlier about being a little flexible when we go to public facing documentation about what are the skill sets and how are they transferable? Because what he got into at Toso Quartz is very specific to the microchip and semiconductor industry. And it's called glassblower. But if you go to that fab, it's crazy what they have in there. Crazy in a good way.
Great. Did you have?
That's fine.
And actually, one question I have is, it builds on the previous question that Benton asked. I a couple of years ago went to a biomanufacturing workforce development conference, and there was a community college that was engaged in a very similar sort of process and apprenticeship program with youth. And one of the things that they found was that the students who were coming through that pipeline were oftentimes students who were already like, they already knew they were going to go on to four-year education. They were, either students whose parents encouraged them to do it. And so oftentimes they weren't remaining with the company post sort of apprenticeship program. And so I'm curious if there's anything that you're doing to, as we think about expanding the workforce and the interested populations that might actually stay with the company, are you doing any specific targeting or encouraging of certain, students that might not normally think about access to these kinds of programs to encourage them to participate?
Yeah, so I think part of my role is also to be able to engage with families and parents and in different spaces and communities. And so at the school district, we have our PAC, our Parent Advisory Councils. And so many times I've been able to participate in sharing about the program, about the industry itself, and maybe in a way that it's more introductory to them, that we live in a really, in a place where you drive by companies every single day, but you don't know what's happening. And so I think I've taken kind of it upon myself to be able to take every opportunity that I have to share it more broadly. And then also working with our community partners, having conversations at our advisory committees about how we message to students. We also have school to career counselors. And so I'm often sharing information about the program and career opportunities with them. And so I think just being able to do it in different spaces. So where if a student hears it for a second time, it kind of resonates with them. If a parent is hearing this from maybe a second source, then it's like, oh, okay, yes, I've heard about this before. And so making it a little bit more familiar, I think, is also important, especially when we're sharing something that's completely new to them.
I think also in response to your question, we need to shift the paradigm around sort of assumptions we make around socioeconomic status. And we're doing more real talk. Like, I think for example, in our district, instead of college and career pathways, we say career and college pathways, and we start with career opportunities first, because maybe college is required. And so talking with families, like Claudia said, especially across language barriers, and making sure that we have access to the information that kids and families need. We've put a lot of pressure on families to tell their kids to go to college, but we don't sometimes know why. And so we're undoing some of that and actually re-informing teachers who all have bachelor's degrees, and counselors who all have bachelor's degrees, and principals who all have bachelor's degrees, that we can actually coach a student who loves to build stuff to get into this apprenticeship or this CTE program and get a job, and put that pressure on for going into debt to get education. And I know that the rhetoric around that is shifting nationally, and there's some suspicion, like, why would I go and get that liberal arts degree? And we want to encourage students, especially equitably across race and gender, to pursue four-year education and to do what is required to obtain their goals and live a rich life. And we want to make sure that the information about the ecosystem within each industry is knowable and teachable. And it's hard for us because the landscape is shifting so fast, but we got to be honest about this and not make assumptions about kids, our perception of their ability level, and to make options available to all students.
And just, I think something worth noting is this is just so new to Oregon, right? We had our first cohort go, and then we had a little speed bump with Foley, so we had to take a gap year, which wasn't helpful. And then it started up again. So we have, small handful of humans where I think would be the win, right? Like, where do they go? Oh, 75% of them stay with the companies, and that would probably encourage more interest and participation. But and then the adult apprenticeship just launched this fall, so we haven't even done a year yet. So I think it's also just like the opportunity of sharing and engaging, and then tweaking and adjusting it to help it stick.
I think, one, you guys know I love your program. And I think the way industry needs to look at this is a long-term recruiting process. And you have to look at it, particularly with minority communities, you have to look at this as a way to build long-term authentic relationships in the community. And you can't start in high school. That means industry, you have to start connecting with the kids and starting in 5th grade or lower because by the time they get to high school, they will have already been exposed to it and the interest has already been established. You know, I come at it from the sports standpoint where Nike, Adidas, and all these shoe companies, they start recruiting kids in 2nd grade. Okay. And whatever the high school programs that want the top talent, they're watching those kids starting in 2nd grade. So you have to use the same paradigm as you have to make kids aware, and industry, you have to make it fun to introduce them to these different areas so that by the time they get to high school, they're already aware. They already have relationships with people in the trade. I mean, not the trade, but in the industry. So now it's a much easier sell to take these kids now that you already know they're interested in this. And then now here's the program now that's going to take them. And like I said, the relationship piece is big because you also don't know how many of those kids that you're engaged with, their parents see this and say, hey, this is a potential career pathway for me. So I was surprised to hear that you guys are looking at adult apprenticeship too. I think that came up, but that's the way I look at it. They see this benefit going to their kids and their kids are excited about it, and they see the industry like, hey, maybe that's a career pathway for me too. So industry, look at it as a long-term relationship building opportunity.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, guys. This is great. We're really interested in pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs. Unfortunately, logging and sawmilling are on that list of things that we can do with 16 and 17-year-olds. We've got a bill for that in Congress, so hopefully we can get something passed during this administration, but we'll see on that. But we've been really focused around industry recognized credentials as a stepping stone and a pathway to help get there, right? Something that we can access. So I'm curious on the youth apprenticeship side, where that fits on the, or how IRCs may or may not be incorporated into youth apprenticeships, given so much pressure and education around developing IRCs and additional funding that comes down the pike for school districts and ESDs. And then on top of that, there's a lot of interest in the state around CTEC and regional career academies, kind of as some new innovative ways to get folks into maybe a more generic but scalable type of learning opportunity and credentialing opportunity that isn't specific to one employer, but kind of a job category. So just curious how you guys might be thinking about some of those things and how they might interplay, are the same or different.
So the industry recognized credentials are currently embedded in our CTE programming. And so when students are in those pathways, those are opportunities that are presented to them through their pathway, their CTE program. But I know that there is additional certifications that students have opportunities to partake in when they're on the job and doing that training that is really beneficial for them. So I know that that's definitely something that we continuously talk about, especially during our advisory meetings, is what other opportunities are out there to increase those opportunities for students, but they are currently kind of embedded in our CTE programming.
As far as the regional models that link funds to build facilities where we could do career and technical education programs, CTEC's a great model. There's also the one with the Willamette ESD that's gotten a more rural reach so kids can bus to it. Those are great. And at one point in Hillsborough, we talked about building a center. And then we adopted kind of an opposite approach, which was to use each campus as a place to specialize. And then we built a shuttle that could get students around. So if I go to Century and have access to that, but I don't want it, I could go to Hill High and do the auto tech program. And we have like a bunch of lifts and electric cars and gas cars up there. And I can do the auto tech program and then bus back to my school for my other content. So internal to our district, we adopted that approach and tried to embed CTE as part of what we do everywhere all the time. But now regionally, it's funny because I'm texting my friend Misty from Nestucca Valley asking where's the district that has the log lift and the sawmill, because they actually have one and the 16-year-olds use it. And so I'm interested there in Northwest Oregon, people are innovating and trying to figure out if we have a logging industry here, why don't we have a CTE program that matches it? And they have one. I don't think it's Nestucca Valley that has it, but I'll figure it out for you. And do you know Dan?
They're way up in Northeast.
Okay. We now, because rural districts have such smaller funding level, we have to prove now. And so in Northwest Oregon, we're talking about building a CTE center, and it would be the regional ESD, or maybe even a community college that would be like the organizing structure. We have to figure out, because you have a map of Oregon, you put all the workforce boards on a map, then you put all the community colleges on a map, and then you put the school districts and ESDs on a map. The colors don't match up. And we need to figure out which like regional organizing body does it. You'd think it would be the workforce boards, but the education systems aren't exactly synced up with the workforce boards. So that's a challenge.
With you mentioned Boley involvement and some setbacks with them. Is there a pathway to develop a program like you've done here for both union and non-union markets?
Comment on that, I think. I found that when we approached Boley to register our apprenticeship, not directly to me, but to them came some questions about why this is happening and why there would be a registered apprenticeship outside of a union house. And there are folks in the room who could probably explain better about where a manufacturing technician might be housed within a union hall. But so far in our community, there isn't a competitor. Whereas I wouldn't try to stand up a carpenter's apprenticeship, because I know I'd stand up in a pre-apprenticeship program to get to the carpenter's apprenticeship, which only starts at 18. But I think a critical question to ask is, within the ecosystem, where are the union sponsored apprenticeships, and how do we create pre-apprenticeships to get to them? And then everywhere else where there's demand, let's directly create joint apprenticeship training committees and stand up apprenticeships that just meet the industry demand. Because with Kathy and Toso and Intel at the table, we came up with the standard of all the competencies that needed to be established and documented, and we came up with an apprenticeship standard that matched exactly the industry demand and what could be on-the-job training and what would be classroom training at our high schools. We all agreed on it, and we became a JATC. That's doable, I think, easily if there's not a competition directly with a union shop.
Okay.
Is that, I'm seeing it. No, I can't remember your name, but there's a conversation here that should be more open in Oregon about where there's competition and where there's not, because the perception of competition slowed us down.
Answer some of that question too. I say that down. I was chair of the workforce board for the state of Oregon for the last 12 years, and worked with the National Governors Association. So in Oregon, we're rare. There's only 3 other states that have an intermediary between us and the Department of Labor. So the Department of Labor is a more direct route if you're setting up an apprenticeship program. But in Oregon, we have Boley operates as that. Ours is even more unique in that the head of Boley is an elected labor commissioner for the state of Oregon. Changes the whole dynamic, where the other 3 are appointed typically by their governors. So those have a little bit more sway based on the governor's position. What we found, we ran in some roadblocks with Boley. One, for probably the biggest reason, there wasn't an adult apprenticeship program for the youth apprenticeship that we created. So that was something that Boley didn't like seeing, for one, and we were able to work around that. There are some avenues to kind of get around it. I mean, this is a registered apprenticeship program is registered across the country, and you register it here, or they registered it here, but it is registered with the Department of Labor. So if you're a company that works within another state, you could easily create an apprenticeship program and bring it to Oregon. and function under that way. So if you can bring something from outside Oregon and bring it in, it's an easier transition. An apprenticeship doesn't have to be union or non-union. I mean, it can be union and non-union. There are some that are not registered at all. Some are just, and I know I'm not an advocate for that, because I think that's something that a company should go through the extra effort, because it gives the employee or the student going through their apprenticeship an actual pathway to across the country to qualify their certification that they went through a training program. Where if it's, it's an in-house program, you don't really have that. And only employers kind of trade that knowledge back and forth. If say Madden Industrial had an apprenticeship program, but it was unregistered, and people understood in our industry that, this is a reputable company and do a good job of training, it means something. Registered apprenticeship program means it across the country. So that's the way to kind of get it. But I think Oregon is a unique situation. I don't think it's, obviously they demonstrate it, and I give them a tremendous amount of credit. I mean, I don't think I haven't gone through this. Travis, having a school district approach, at that time, I know he approached me about creating an apprenticeship program, a youth apprenticeship in school. That doesn't happen. 12 years. I never had a school district come to me at once to talk to me about apprenticeship program. To have somebody do that from the school district was pivotal. And then you have the city, it forms in the city of Hillsborough, who was, willing to really push it and encourage it, fund it. And then you have employers that stepped up that wanted to do it as well. I mean, that's a unicorn right there. You don't understand. And so their success should make it easier for employers in the state of Oregon. And I can tell you, 25 years ago, I had an employer explain to me once, when they looked at employment, they had an immediate plan, a 5-year plan, and a 10-year plan. And when I looked at that, I understood that's an employer that is visionary. Because we had, in the last 25 years, people entering the labor force increased in age 2 years. So in essence, employment coming into the bubble, if you looked at employment as a big bubble, we have an intake valve and an outtake valve. We have baby boomers now retiring at a greater rate than we ever had. So that bubble now has the pipe going out has gotten larger. The pipe coming in got smaller. So we created a skills gap because the pipes changed in size. And this is a way to increase the pipe coming into that labor force. And for an employer to look at it and say, I got to look long term because we have a problem. We have to start training the next workforce. This is an opportunity to do that. And this is a group that's been coming together to talk about it. And that's also a unicorn situation, because most people don't want to share that kind of knowledge. But as our state, we need this group to really get the word out. And I think this is a community, a group right here that could help.
Thank you, Ken.
So, just to add one thing to that, I've been in manufacturing, a few different companies, for over 30 years. Apprenticeship was a bad word. Okay. I mean, it just was. We didn't want to put in the time. We didn't want to deal with all the rules, and, there's just a lot to it. The value I'm seeing in what we're doing now has brought us to actually doing an adult apprenticeship program in partnership with PCC, which is focused on upskilling. We do a lot of internal promotions from people coming into manufacturing into the equipment tech positions. And you have to have ways to help advance them a little bit more, because it's not the typical way that people were coming into those jobs in the past. And those are an aging group. It is probably the largest pipe goes down. So we came up with a way to do that. That same apprenticeship can work to, if your youth, they eventually may go into that. You can hire from outside, military. It's giving us something we didn't have before, and it's a very structured approach on upskilling that we didn't have. I mean, you have those employees that are going to take classes and do things and upskill and get mentored, but we need more right now. So for us, this has kind of led to looking at apprenticeship completely differently.
So I'm loath to cut the conversation off, but we are at a point where, you know, at Q1, we didn't get our legislative update. Kyle Thomas, HEC's legislative and policy director, is here to give us that legislative update. But just really quick, I also want to acknowledge that on the record that Boley was invited to this conversation multiple times. And I think that what you're seeing here is tremendous opportunity, but that there are also tremendous obstacles to making this work functionally. But the payoff, I mean, I'm looking at Reese up there. I think the payoff is worth it. And so we'll just continue to try to work on this, streamline this. And I think if this is something that you're interested in learning more about or spending more time with this, let me know, and we'll make sure to spend some time with this at our next quarterly meeting. But I really want to give a round of applause for the panelists for their hard work. And with that, we'll invite Kyle Thomas in to give a legislative update.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Sorry, just had a momentary tech issue there. You know, after you hear my update, you may decide it was better off to skip it, but here I go. My name is Kyle Thomas. I'm the Director of Legislative and Policy Affairs for HEC. So time-wise, right now, legislative session is halfway over. Bills-wise, we're not quite halfway over. So there's been a preliminary deadline to notice legislation for potential action, and that deadline has passed. That's also a very easy deadline for most bills to clear. The next and harder deadline comes next week, when bills that were introduced in their first committee must be voted out of that first committee or sent to a committee that's exempt from that deadline requirement. So as of next week, we will have a really granular idea of what the rest of this session is going to look like. As is always the case, getting a bill, even a bill that has a cost and requires funding, out of their first committee, keeping it alive tends not to be that difficult. But the result is we're in the point in session where every day dozens of bills are getting sent down to pile up in the Ways and Means Committee, where they will stay until the budget conversation really starts to heat up. I will spend just a moment here on budget. So earlier last month, the co-chairs of the Ways and Means Committee, as they do every 2 years, released their budget framework. This sort of sets the levels and expectations on which the legislature will start to frame out what will become the legislatively adopted budget. For higher education workforce development, that budget is at current service level. So basically what we were doing this biennium plus an inflationary factor plus phase-ins minus phase-outs. Practically speaking, that level represents a cut to institutions of higher education whose real costs increase greater than what the state calculates for state current service level. And it also means a discontinuation, as was expected, of state funding for Future Ready Oregon initiatives. But we are asking for and are expecting to receive a reauthorization of $62.5 million in federal funds, and that will sustain the Future Ready programmatic activity through 2026. Worry is heating up ahead of the May revenue forecast. Folks around this time are always asked by budget writers to pare down their expectations and discuss the scalability of their proposals. Oh, you're asking for 5 million. What can you do with 2? In many years, though, there's a belief, or at least the hope, that those discussions will result in at least some positive funding decisions. And the mood feels a little bit different this time around. So if we think about like the budget environment where Future Ready Oregon was established, you know, essentially federal money was kind of raining down on the state in terms of economic stimulus. This year, it's more or less the opposite, with the greater likelihood being that in some areas, the federal government may or even already has pulled back funding, and that will create some significant strain on state budgets. That's on top of the economic factors I'm sure you're all familiar with, that are indicative of a broader economic slowdown. That slowdown in turn strains the state budget in terms of more spending in sort of the human service categories. And of course, larger firms nationwide are increasing their likelihood of a recession in their forecasting. This is of course all conjecture. The one document that really matters is that the state's May revenue forecast, which is the revenue, sets the revenue and the budget reserve levels that lawmakers can budget against, will come out in about a month. And we're basically in this period where limited action is going to occur in terms of passing bills that have budget asks, or getting a lot more information on what the final budget is going to look like, really until that forecast comes out. I think as folks are generally aware, the governor and the legislature do continue to prioritize potential new investment in the areas of K-12 ed, housing, behavioral and mental health, and wildfire. We're in the place right now where we are presenting our budget to the Ways and Means Education Subcommittee. That's a 3-week process we engage in every couple of years. I was about to tell you that April 10th is the opportunity for you to have your voice heard in terms of your desires related to ongoing workforce development funding. However, not 3 minutes ago, I got a note from the committee that says that date is canceled, owing to the need to have an extended floor session in both the House and the Senate. So do stay tuned. We will figure out from the committee chair what that means in terms of when the workforce themed public hearing opportunity will be. And even if there's not a rescheduling of that themed opportunity, there are other public hearing days that are available to you to come testify on the HEC Higher Ed and Workforce Development budget. And we'll make sure that that information gets out to you. I'm very cognizant of the clock. I know that you're scheduled to be done at 1 and I have a hard stop. I'll just mention a couple of bills very quickly. This is a pretty quiet session in terms of what we are tracking that might be of interest to the folks around this table. We are, of course, tracking our own House Bill 3029. This is a bill that seeks alignment between some Future Ready Oregon policy and policy related to local workforce development boards and continuing workforce investments, really aligning some language around critical workforce shortages and strategic workforce opportunities, making an important addition to priority populations, strengthening some youth workforce programs that HEC administers. This has been the subject of some negotiation between HEC and the local workforce development boards. We believe we have everything ironed out at this point. We expect this will get a vote out of the House Higher Education Workforce Development Committee tomorrow. 2 other bills that we're tracking that may be of some light interest to folks. There are 2 workforce investment bills. House Bill 3826, which is targeted at the trucking workforce and currently proposes a $2 million as amended, $2 million appropriation to local workforce development boards for opportunities there. And there's also House Bill 3634, which is a bill that would strengthen the water workforce in the state through similar mechanisms, through direct grants from HEC to local workforce development boards in order to get more individuals through those pipelines. That's really it. With just a couple minutes left, I'm happy to answer questions folks may have.
We probably have time for one quick question if anybody does. The other option here would be if you have questions or you want something more specific, is to send those questions to me, and then I'm happy to forward those to Kyle and his team, and we can get a response to you via email or follow up in other ways. So, Kyle, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we can move into concluding today's meeting. I just want to give you a quick idea of a couple of next steps to be aware of. Our Q3 meeting will be outside of the Portland and Salem metro area. in August. If you are involved somewhere that you think, hey, I want to host this group there, maybe you have a facility or a program, you want to do a panel or a tour, again, that leading with learning, and having the conversations. I mean, I think we could have gone on the youth apprenticeship conversation for at least another hour. And so the earlier we can plan something like that, the more time I think it gives us to understand where the interest might lie. So let me know if you think you might be interested, and I'll work with the ELT to start making some plans there. A couple of other things. We just fully advanced this slide. Thank you. We will come back with, our next iteration of these occupational profiles. Our goal will actually be that full list in your folder will be occupational profiles for all of those occupations, not just the 15 that we had today, but that reflect what we talked about there. I'm hoping to move forward through the working groups into opportunity mapping. I think that's where we see the connection between the legislative mandate with those occupational profiles and some of the broader goals to move our workforce system forward. So I think just some early initial thoughts about that I'm hoping to share at Q3. And then continuing to work on, I think there's a lot of interest in apprenticeship and earn and learn opportunities and the ways in which the system can be streamlined, made more effective. And I've been doing a lot of exploration and research and interviewing around that. And I actually hope to have something to share out with you at Q3 as well. So just a few things to look forward to. The other thing too, I'll mention, if you have something that you feel like this group should be talking about and we're not talking about, let me know. I'll make sure we find some time to get it onto an agenda. But I really want to thank you all for making the time today. Thank you for all the work that you all are doing on behalf of Oregonians and making the time this morning. And I wish you a safe drive back to wherever you're headed. Thanks.